5 signatures. That was all Caleb Montgomery thought it would take to erase 10 years of marriage. He looked at his wife across the mahogany table, a woman he saw as plain, unambitious, and financially dependent on his empire, and felt nothing but relief. He was trading a Honda Civic for a Ferrari, or so he told his mistress earlier that afternoon. He thought he was discarding a poor burden to ascend to the next level of elite society. He didn't know that the woman sitting quietly across from him wasn't just a simple librarian named Lydia. He was sitting across from the Grand Duchess of Hemsburg, a woman whose private trust fund could buy his entire company 3 times over, and by the time the ink was dry, Caleb wouldn't just be divorced, he would be destitute. This is the story of a man who dug his own grave with a golden shovel. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it felt like it was trying to erase the city from the 45th floor of the Montgomery and Company building. However, the weather was just aesthetic background noise, a grey canvas against which Caleb Montgomery could admire his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass. Caleb adjusted his bespoke Tom Ford suit, catching the glint of his Patek Philippe Nautilus, a gift to himself for closing the Series B funding round. He was 42, handsome in a jagged, hungry sort of way, and convinced that he was the center of the universe. "Are you still staring at yourself?" The voice came from the plush leather sofa in the corner of his office. Sienna Cross didn't look up from her iPad. She was sharp, angular, and terrifyingly beautiful. As Caleb's chief marketing officer and his mistress of 2 years, she was the mirror image of his ambition. She was everything he wanted to be: loud, expensive, and undeniable. "I'm not staring," Caleb said, turning to her with a smirk. "I'm visualizing. The IPO is 6 months away. Once that hits, we're not just rich, Sienna. We're by an island, rich." Sienna finally looked up, her dark eyes narrowing. There is no we publicly. Caleb, not until you handle the baggage." The baggage. That was their code word for Lydia. Lydia Montgomery, Caleb's wife of 10 years. When they met, Caleb was a broke grad student with a laptop and a caffeine addiction, and Lydia was a quiet, soft-spoken girl working in the university archives. She had paid the rent when his first 3 startups failed. She had cooked cheap pasta dinners and mended his shirts. She was the definition of stand by your man. But Caleb didn't want someone who remembered him when he was weak. He wanted someone who matched his power. Lydia, with her thrift store cardigans, her job at the local public library, and her complete lack of interest in galas or networking, had become an embarrassment. She was poor in spirit, he told himself. She didn't understand luxury. She was a relic of a life he had outgrown. "I'm doing it tonight," Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave. Sienna stood up, smoothing her pencil skirt. She walked over to him, placing a manicured hand on his chest. "Tonight, you promise?" "I have the papers in my briefcase. I'm taking her to that Italian place on 4th. I'll explain that we've just evolved in different directions. I'll offer her the town home and a monthly stipend. She'll take it. Lydia hates conflict." "She'd better," Sienna whispered, leaning in to bite his lower lip. "Because the board is asking questions about the family image for the IPO. They want a power couple. Caleb, not a CEO, and a librarian who wears canvas shoes." Caleb kissed her hard, a mix of lust and arrogance. "She's a mouse, Sienna. Mice don't fight back when the hawk swoops down. By Monday, I'll be a free man, and by the IPO, you and I will be the face of this city." He checked his watch. 6:30 p.m. He left the office feeling electric. He drove his Aston Martin through the slick streets, rehearsing his speech. He had convinced himself that he was doing Lydia a favor. She was simple. She liked gardening and reading. She didn't belong in his world of private jets and high-stakes equity. He was setting her free to be ordinary. When he arrived at Il Forno, Lydia was already seated at a corner table. She looked painfully out of place amidst the glitz of the restaurant. She was wearing a simple navy dress he'd seen a dozen times, her dark hair pulled back in a practical, unstylish bun. No jewelry except her wedding band, a thin gold ring he'd bought for $200 a decade ago. He had offered to upgrade it years ago, but she had refused. Sentimental garbage, he thought. "Hello, Caleb," she said softly as he sat down. Her voice was calm, melodic, but lacking the command he craved. "Lydia," he nodded, skipping the kiss on the cheek. He waved a waiter over immediately. "Bottle of the Barolo, the 2016. "Celebrating?" Lydia asked, tilting her head. "In a way," Caleb said, unbuttoning his jacket. He looked at her, really looked at her, searching for a reason to stay. He found none. She was just plain. "Lydia, we need to talk about the future." Lydia placed her napkin in her lap. She didn't look nervous. She just looked tired. "I suppose we do. Caleb, you've been home for dinner 3 times in the last 4 months. I'm building an empire, Lydia. You know that." "I know you are building something," she said enigmatically. "Look," Caleb started, deciding to skip the appetizers and go straight for the throat. "I'll be blunt. Us, it's not working. I've outgrown this dynamic. I need a partner who can navigate the world I live in now. You're happy with the simple things, and that's fine. But it's not me anymore." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the thick manila envelope. He slid it across the white tablecloth. It looked violent against the pristine fabric. "These are divorce papers. Lydia." He waited for the tears. He waited for the begging. He had a whole speech prepared about how he would take care of her, how she wouldn't starve. Lydia didn't flinch. She stared at the envelope for a long, silence-filled minute. Then she looked up at him. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, seemed to turn into shards of cold amber. "Is it Sienna?" she asked. No screaming, just a factual inquiry. Caleb choked on his water. "That's irrelevant. This is about us." "It's Sienna Cross," Lydia confirmed for herself. The marketing executive. Flashy, loud, new money. "She understands my world," Caleb snapped, his voice rising, drawing glances from nearby tables. "She fits the brand. Lydia, look at you. You're wearing a dress from Target to a 5-star restaurant. You embarrass me." The words hung in the air, cruel and final. Lydia slowly reached out and took the envelope. "I embarrass you because I am poor. Is that it?" "It's a mindset. Lydia, you have a poverty mindset. I can't have that dragging me down." Lydia opened the envelope. She produced a pen from her purse, not a cheap ballpoint, Caleb noticed for the first time, but a heavy, vintage fountain pen with a gold nib. "Where do I sign?" she asked. Caleb was stunned. You aren't going to read it. I'm offering the town home." "I don't want the town home," she said, flipping to the signature page. "The alimony. Then I was generous. I don't want your money. Caleb, don't be a martyr," he hissed. "You can't survive on a librarian's salary in this city." Lydia looked him dead in the eye, the pen hovering over the paper. You have absolutely no idea who I am, do you? Caleb, 10 years. And you never really looked. She signed her name with a flourish. Lydia H. V. Montgomery. She closed the envelope and slid it back. Then she stood up. Enjoy the Barolo. It's a bit tannic for my taste, but you always did prefer price tags over palate. And with that, the poor wife walked out, leaving Caleb with the divorce papers, a $400 bottle of wine, and a strange, creeping sensation of dread that he couldn't quite identify. The divorce was finalized in record time, because Lydia contested nothing asked for 0 assets, 0 alimony, and 0 spousal support. The courts rubber-stamped the dissolution of the marriage within 6 weeks. Caleb felt like he had pulled off the heist of the century. She took nothing, Sienna asked, pacing around Caleb's penthouse, which she had officially moved into 3 days prior. She was holding a glass of champagne, looking at the city lights. That's suspicious. Caleb, who walks away from a $50 million estate with nothing. Someone who has no fight in them. Caleb laughed, kicking his feet up on the ottoman. She's moved into some small studio apartment in the arts district. I heard she's taking the bus. It's sad. Really. But she wanted to play the victim. It makes us look good, though, Sienna mused. The clean break. We can announce the engagement next month at the shareholders' gala. Life was perfect. The IPO roadshow was beginning. The media loved Caleb the Bachelor CEO, the visionary. Sienna was orchestrating a massive PR campaign to introduce herself as the new power behind the throne. But the cracks began to show on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the papers were signed. Caleb was in a meeting with his CFO, a frantic little man named Gary, specialized in tax avoidance. Caleb, we have a hiccup with the liquidity for the IPO, Gary said, sweating through his shirt. What hiccup? We have the capital requirements. The initial funding from the angel investor group is still sitting in the holding account. Well, that's the thing. Gary clicked his pen nervously. We went to audit the cap table. You know how your initial seed money, the $5 million that started the company 7 years ago, came from that blind trust, the Hemsberg Trust. Yeah, silent money. They never interfered. Best investors I ever had. We just got a notification from the Trust's legal counsel. They are invoking a character clause in the original lending agreement. Caleb frowned. English. Gary. The loan wasn't a gift. Caleb. It was a conditional investment based on the stability of the primary beneficiary's domestic partnership. Specifically, the agreement states that the capital is secured against the marital union of the founder. Caleb laughed. That's ridiculous. Who writes a clause like that? The notification says that due to the dissolution of the marriage, the trust is exercising its right to recall the principal investment immediately, with interest. Caleb stopped laughing. They want the $5 million back. No. Caleb, the company is worth 100 times that now. The contract converts the loan into equity, if recalled. If they exercise this, they don't want the money back. They want their percentage of the current valuation. Caleb felt the blood drain from his face. How much equity? Gary looked at the spreadsheet, his face pale. Based on the compounding interest and the conversion rate, they would own 51% of Montgomery Tech, controlling interest. That's impossible. Caleb slammed his fist on the desk. Get our lawyers on the phone. Who controls this Hemsberg Trust? Some dusty old European bank. We're trying to find out. The paperwork traces back to a law firm in Zurich, then to a shell company in Luxembourg. It's impenetrable. Fix it, Caleb snarled. I am not losing my company because of some zombie clause from 7 years ago, just as I'm about to ring the bell on Wall Street. He stormed out of the office, needing to vent. He called Sienna. Babe, we have a problem, he told her as he paced the hallway. I have a problem too. Sienna's voice was shrill. I'm at the apartment. Lydia's stuff. You said she took everything. She took her clothes and books. Why, there's a safe in the back of the walk-in closet, the one behind the false panel. I tried to have the contractors remove it to expand the shoe rack. I didn't even know there was a safe there, Caleb said. Well, there is, and it's not empty. The contractor cracked it open because we thought it was part of the wall structure. Caleb, you need to come home. Now. Caleb drove home, his mind racing between the business disaster and whatever Sienna had found. When he walked into the penthouse, the air was thick with tension. Sienna was sitting on the floor of the master bedroom, surrounded by boxes. But these weren't cardboard moving boxes. They were velvet-lined cases. What is this? Caleb asked. Sienna held up a tiara. It wasn't a plastic prop. It was heavy, encrusted with diamonds that caught the recessed lighting and threw rainbows across the room. The center stone was a sapphire the size of a quail egg. Is this real? Sienna whispered, her voice trembling with greed and confusion. Lydia didn't have jewelry, Caleb said, baffled. She wore a $10 watch. Look at the papers. Caleb. Sienna pointed to a stack of yellowed documents on the floor. Caleb picked up a heavy, parchment envelope sealed with red wax. The crest on the wax was a double-headed eagle holding a sword. He broke the seal and unfolded the document. It was written in French, but a certified English translation was stapled to the front. Certificate of lineage. Subject Her Serene Highness. Genevieve Lydia Henriette von Hemsberg. Title Grand Duchess of Aveline. Heir presumptive to the Duchy of Hemsberg. Caleb read it twice. Genevieve Lydia's name is Lydia Benoit. Read the rest, Sienna snapped. Born Genevieve Lydia Henriette. Mother Princess Sophie of Austria. Father Duke Henry of Hemsberg. Renounced public title in 2012 for the purpose of private education in the United States. Resumed use of middle name Lydia for security purposes. Caleb dropped the paper. His knees gave out, and he sat on the edge of the bed. The Hemsberg Trust, he whispered. The investors, the ones who funded my company. What? Sienna looked at him. The money I started the company with, it came from the Hemsberg Trust. I thought it was just a random venture capital fund. He looked at the woman he had called poor, the woman he had mocked for coupon clipping, the woman he had discarded because she didn't fit his luxury brand. She wasn't poor. She was hiding. She's royalty, Sienna breathed, staring at the tiara. Your ex-wife is actual, literal royalty. And she owns my company, Caleb realized, the horror crashing down on him. Gary said the trust is recalling the loan. If Lydia is the beneficiary of the trust, she controls the board. Sienna finished the sentence. Caleb scrambled for his phone. He dialed Lydia's number. It went straight to voicemail. You have reached Lydia. I am unavailable. If this is regarding the library schedule, please press 1. If this is regarding Caleb Montgomery, please contact my counsel, Lord Harrison Cole, at the firm of Cole, Sterling and Associates. Lord Caleb choked. He looked at Sienna. The woman who was supposed to be his ticket to the high life suddenly looked cheap compared to the staggering, historical wealth sitting in velvet boxes on the floor. "We have to find her," Caleb said, standing up. "We have to stop her before she executes that clause." "How?" Sienna asked. "She's gone." "No," Caleb remembered. "She said she was at the Arts District. She's probably in some dump. I can talk to her. She's Lydia. She's soft. I can charm her. I'll tell her it was a mistake. I'll tell her we can work it out." "You're going to try to get her back?" Sienna's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm going to try to save my company. Sienna, if she activates that equity swap, I'm an employee in my own business." Caleb grabbed his keys and ran out the door, leaving his mistress alone with the diamonds of a duchess she had helped displace. He didn't know it yet, but the soft woman he remembered had died the moment he handed her those divorce papers. He was about to meet the Grand Duchess. The address Lydia had listed on the divorce settlement, 1402 Industrial Way, was in the heart of the Arts District, a neighborhood that was currently in the awkward adolescence of gentrification. It was a mix of trendy coffee shops and abandoned textile factories. Caleb parked his Aston Martin between a dumpster and a graffiti-covered wall, grimacing as his Italian leather loafers hit a puddle of questionable grey water. "Unbelievable," he muttered, checking the address on his phone. "She leaves a penthouse for a squat." The building was a hulking brick structure with barred windows on the ground floor. There was no doorman, no awning, just a heavy steel door with a rusted intercom. It screamed poverty. It screamed desperation. It was exactly where Caleb expected a woman with no ambition to end up. He pressed the buzzer, holding it down for 5 seconds. Click. "Yes." A voice crackled. It wasn't Lydia. It was deep, distorted, and male. "I'm here to see Lydia," Caleb barked. "Tell her it's her husband, ex-husband, whatever. It's urgent." "One moment." The steel door buzzed and clicked open with a heavy, pneumatic hiss. Caleb pushed through, ready to navigate a dark hallway filled with bicycles and smelling of cat litter. Instead, he stepped into a different world. The interior was not a hallway. It was a decontamination chamber of sorts, sleek, white, and brightly lit. A second door, made of bulletproof glass, stood 10 feet ahead. Behind a reception desk that looked like a slab of obsidian sat a man who could only be described as a human wall. He wore a black tactical suit, not a security guard uniform. "Mr. Montgomery," the man said, not looking up from a monitor bank. "You will leave your phone, keys, and any recording devices in the tray." "Excuse me," Caleb scoffed. "I'm not visiting a prison. I'm visiting a librarian who thinks she's playing hard to get." The man finally looked up. His eyes were cold and dead. "This is a diplomatic residence, Mr. Montgomery. You are on sovereign soil of the Duchy of Hemsburg while inside this structure. If you do not comply, I will remove you. Physically." Caleb hesitated. The reality of the situation was beginning to seep through the cracks of his arrogance. Diplomatic residence. In an old warehouse. He dropped his phone and keys into the tray. The glass door slid open. He walked into the main loft. It was cavernous. The abandoned factory exterior was a shell. Inside, the space was a masterpiece of industrial luxury. Exposed brick walls had been sealed and polished. The floors were heated concrete. A chandelier that looked like a constellation of diamonds hung from the 30-foot ceiling. And there, sitting by a roaring gas fireplace, was Lydia. But it wasn't the Lydia he knew. The cardigan was gone. She was wearing a silk robe that flowed like water, embroidered with gold thread. Her hair, usually in a tight bun, cascaded over her shoulders in loose, glossy waves. She held a glass of dark amber liquid, staring into the fire. "You found the dump. I see," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. She didn't turn around. "Lydia." Caleb walked closer, his footsteps loud on the concrete. "Or should I call you Your Highness now? Is that the game?" She turned slowly. Her face was composed, her expression unreadable. "You can call me Genevieve. It's the name my father gave me. Lydia was my grandmother's name. I borrowed it for a while. 10 years. Lydia, you lied to me for a decade," Caleb shouted, trying to regain the upper hand with anger. "You pretended to be poor. You let me work myself to death while you were sitting on this." He gestured wildly at the room. "I didn't pretend to be poor. Caleb, I pretended to be normal." She took a sip of her drink. "I wanted to know what it was like to be valued for my mind, my kindness, my company, not my title, not the GDP of my family's estate. You made me pay for everything. I paid for your first 3 failed businesses. Caleb," she corrected him, her voice sharpening. "I paid the rent on that basement apartment when you were too proud to ask your parents for help. I cooked your meals. I cleaned your clothes. I did everything a wife does. The fact that I didn't dip into the Hemsberg Trust to buy you a Ferrari, that bothers you. It's fraud." Caleb grasped at straws. "Marriage by deception. Actually," a new voice entered the room. From the shadows of the mezzanine, a tall man in a bespoke grey suit descended the spiral staircase. He was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and glasses that probably cost more than Caleb's car. "Harrison Cole," the man introduced himself, extending a hand that Caleb ignored. "Chief Legal Counsel for the Hemsberg estate. And regarding your claim of fraud, Mr. Montgomery, I would remind you that Genevieve never lied on a legal document. She is Lydia. It is her legal middle name. She simply omitted the titles she doesn't use in America." "Who is this guy?" Caleb demanded, looking at Lydia. "My lawyer," Lydia said calmly, "and the executor of the trust you are currently trying to defraud." Caleb froze. "I'm not defrauding anyone. I built that company." "With Hemsberg money," Cole interjected smoothly. "Money lent under specific moral stipulations. Stipulations you violated the moment you moved Miss Cross into the penthouse while still legally married." "You were spying on me," Caleb hissed. "We monitor our investments." Cole smiled thinly. "We knew about Sienna 6 months ago. We knew about the business dinners that ended in hotel rooms. We knew about the jewelry you bought her using the company expense account." Caleb's stomach dropped. That was marketing expenses. "It was embezzlement," Lydia said. Standing up, she walked toward him, and for the first time, Caleb felt small. She wasn't just taller in heels, she carried herself with the weight of centuries of rule. "You tried to divorce me because I didn't fit your aesthetic. Caleb, you called me poor. You said I had a poverty mindset. Do you remember I was angry?" Caleb stammered. "I didn't mean it. Look, Lydia, Genevieve, we can fix this. I still love you. We can tear up the papers. We can start over. Imagine the power couple we would be. You and me. My drive. Your heritage." Lydia laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "You don't want me. Caleb, you want the safety of the trust. You're scared because Gary told you about the equity recall." I'm not scared, Caleb lied. I'm concerned for us. There is no us, Lydia said, her voice turning to steel. There hasn't been an us since the day you told me my shoes were embarrassing at your Christmas party 3 years ago. I stayed because I took a vow. I take vows very seriously. My family has started wars over vows. Caleb, but you broke the vow. You signed the papers. I can contest them. I was under duress. You were under the influence of greed, Cole corrected, and Miss Cross. Lydia walked past Caleb, heading toward the staircase. The recall happens tomorrow at 9 a.m. Caleb, the Trust will assume 51% control of Montgomery Tech. You will be removed as CEO, pending an internal audit regarding the misappropriation of funds for your mistress. You can't do that, Caleb screamed, his face turning red. It's my company. It was your company, Lydia said, pausing on the first step. She looked back at him, her eyes filled with pity, which hurt worse than hate. Now, it's just another asset in my portfolio. I suggest you update your resume. I hear the job market is tough for executives with embezzlement scandals. I'll ruin you. Caleb lunged toward the stairs. Before he could take 2 steps, the security guard the human wall was there. He didn't strike Caleb. He simply intercepted him, grabbing Caleb's arm with a grip that felt like a hydraulic press. Mr. Montgomery is leaving, Lydia said, not looking back as she ascended the stairs. Let go of me. Caleb struggled. Walk, the guard said, or be dragged. Caleb was marched out of the loft, through the decontamination chamber, and literally thrown, onto the wet pavement of Industrial Way. He lay there for a moment in the rain, staring at the steel door. He had gone in to manipulate a librarian. He had been thrown out by a queen. But as he picked himself up, wiping mud from his suit, panic was replaced by a twisted, desperate resolve. They thought they had him. No. He had 1 card left. The shareholders' gala. The public didn't know yet. If he could control the narrative, if he could paint Lydia as a vengeful, crazy ex-wife trying to steal his work, maybe the board would back him. He got into his car and dialed Sienna. Get the PR team, he breathed heavily into the phone. We're going to war. The annual Montgomery Tech Shareholders Gala was the event of the Seattle social calendar. It was held in the Crystal Ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Everything was gold, velvet, and excessive. Caleb stood at the entrance, a frozen smile plastered on his face. He had barely slept. He had spent the last 24 hours manic, briefing his PR crisis team, trying to lock down board members, and attempting to block the Hemsberg Trust's legal maneuvers. Sienna stood next to him. She looked stunning in a red Vera Wang gown, but her eyes were darting around the room nervously. She wasn't wearing the tiara. It was back in the safe, burning a hole in their consciousness. Are they here? Sienna whispered, gripping Caleb's arm too tightly. Not yet, Caleb muttered through his teeth, waving at a tech blogger. Just keep smiling. If we look confident, the stock holds. If the stock holds, the board won't let her fire me. The plan was simple. Announce the IPO date tonight. Live. Before Lydia could trigger the takeover in the morning. Once the announcement was made to the press, recalling the loan would look like sabotage. It would tank the value of the company, hurting the trust too. It was a game of chicken. Caleb, Sienna. A reporter from TechCrunch shoved a microphone in their faces. Rumors are swirling about a restructuring of the cap table. Is it true you're losing majority control? Absolute nonsense. Caleb laughed, his voice booming. Montgomery Tech is stronger than ever. In fact, tonight we have a surprise announcement that will revolutionize our Q4 projections. And the divorce, the reporter pressed. Is it true your ex-wife is contesting the settlement? My ex-wife, Caleb said, adopting a somber, pitying tone, is a confused woman. She's having a hard time letting go. We are trying to be supportive, but... He trailed off as the room suddenly went quiet. It wasn't a gradual hush. It was a sudden, vacuum-like silence that started at the grand double doors and swept across the ballroom. The jazz band stopped playing. Waiters stopped pouring champagne. Caleb turned toward the doors. Flashbulbs began to erupt like strobe lights, blindingly fast. Walking through the entrance was not Lydia the librarian. It was Her Serene Highness. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her frame and then flared out into a dramatic train. It was off the shoulder, revealing skin that looked like porcelain. But it was the jewelry that made the billionaires in the room gasp. Around her neck was the Hemsberg choker, 3 rows of diamonds, with a sapphire pendant the size of a matchbox. On her head was not a tiara, but a simple, diamond-encrusted hair clip that held back her swept waves. She didn't walk. She glided. Flanking her were 2 men. On her left, Lord Harrison Cole, looking smug. On her right, a man Caleb recognized from the news, the Austrian ambassador to the United States. "Oh my God," Sienna whispered. She brought a diplomat. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. These were tech bros, venture capitalists, and social climbers. They respected money, but they worshipped power. And what walked into the room was old-world power. The kind of power that didn't just buy buildings but owned the land they were built on for 600 years. Caleb felt his legs turn to jelly. He had to stop this. He had to dominate the space. He stepped into the center of the aisle, blocking her path. "Lydia," he said loudly, trying to sound authoritative. "I see you decided to crash the party. A bit desperate, don't you think?" The room gasped. "You didn't talk to someone wearing $10 million in diamonds like that." Lydia stopped. She looked at him, then down at Sienna. She offered a small, polite smile, the kind you give to a child who has just spilled juice on the carpet. "Good evening, Caleb," she said. Her voice was amplified. Caleb realized with horror that the sound guy had cut the music, but turned up the ambient mics. "I'm not crashing. As the majority shareholder, I believe I'm hosting—" "You are not the majority shareholder," Caleb shouted, losing his cool. "The papers aren't processed. This is my night." Actually, the Austrian ambassador stepped forward. The transfer was executed at 12:01 a.m. European Central Time, which was 6 hours ago. He pulled a document from his tuxedo jacket. "Mr. Forte, Montgomery, you are currently trespassing on company property." The cameras were clicking furiously. Click, 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 click. Every bead of sweat on Caleb's forehead was being documented in 4K resolution. Sienna stepped forward, trying to salvage her moment. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and take over. Caleb built this. Who do you think you are?" Lydia turned her gaze to Sienna. It was a look of absolute dissection. "And you must be Sienna," Lydia said pleasantly. "The marketing director." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I believe you have something that belongs to my family. A sapphire tiara. It was in the safe in the penthouse." Sienna went pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "We have the security footage of you opening the safe." "Miss Cross," Harrison Cole said, his voice cutting through the room. And we have the footage of you trying to hide it in your luggage this morning." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Thief. The word hung in the air. "That's a lie," Caleb yelled. "She's framing us." Lydia sighed, a gesture of elegant boredom. She signaled to the stage, the large screen behind the podium, which was displaying the Montgomery Tech logo, flickered. A video feed appeared. It wasn't the security footage. It was a spreadsheet. "Since we are all here to discuss finances," Lydia addressed the room, turning her back on Caleb. "Let's look at the P&L statement for the marketing department." Rows of numbers highlighted in red appeared. $100,000 for consulting paid to a shell company registered to Miss Cross. $50,000 for client retention spent at the Four Seasons Maui. During a week when no clients were present. But Mr. Montgomery was... Lydia turned back to the crowd. "I am not here to ruin the party. I am here to save the company from gross mismanagement and looting." She looked at the board of directors, who were huddled near the shrimp tower, looking terrified. "Gentlemen," Lydia said, "I am calling an emergency vote of no confidence, effective immediately. The chairman of the board, a heavy-set man named Arthur Vance. Wait. Vance is banned. Let's use Arthur Pendergast," stepped forward. He looked at Caleb, then at the Duchess. The choice was between a sinking ship and a diamond-encrusted lifeboat. "Seconded," Pendergast said. "Thirded," another board member shouted. "Carried," Lydia said softly. She looked at Caleb. "You're fired. Caleb, security will escort you out." "You can't do this to me," Caleb screamed, his voice cracking. He looked like a madman, his face purple, veins bulging. "I am Montgomery Tech. I am the visionary." "You," Lydia said, leaning in close so only he could hear, "are a man who threw away a queen to play with a pawn. Checkmate." Two security guards, real ones, not the hotel staff, grabbed Caleb by the arms. "Don't touch me," he thrashed. "Sienna, do something." Caleb looked around for his partner in crime, but Sienna was gone. She had slipped into the crowd the moment the embezzlement figures went up on the screen, disappearing like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. As Caleb was dragged backward, shouting obscenities, the flashbulbs didn't stop. They captured the exact moment his life fell apart. Lydia watched him go, her expression impassive. Then she turned to the stunned room, picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and raised it. "Now," she said, her smile dazzling and dangerous. "Who wants to discuss the IPO?" The rain had returned to Seattle, washing away the glitter of the gala, but not the stain on Caleb Montgomery's reputation. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Caleb sat in his Aston Martin, parked a block away from the penthouse he had called home for 5 years. He had tried his keycard in the lobby elevator. Access denied. He had tried the service entrance. Access denied. He had called the concierge, a man he had tipped thousands of dollars over the years. The man had simply said, "Mr. Montgomery, the police have been instructed to arrest you for trespassing if you attempt entry. Please, go away." So here he was, homeless in a $200,000 car. His phone was blowing up, not with congratulations on the IPO, but with Google alerts. Montgomery Tech, CEO ousted in royal coup. The Duchess of Tech, who is the real Lydia Montgomery, Sienna Cross, from CMO to embezzlement suspect. "Sienna," Caleb muttered. He needed an ally. He needed a witness to say Lydia was unstable, that she had set them up. He drove to the apartment complex he had rented for Sienna 2 years ago, the Love Nest, where the affair had blossomed. He pounded on the door. "Sienna, open up. We need to get our story straight." The door opened, but the chain stayed on. Sienna's face appeared in the crack. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Go away. Caleb, let me in. Sienna, we have to call the press. We have to tell them she's lying about the numbers. We can say she hacked the system." "Are you insane?" Sienna hissed. "She didn't hack anything. Caleb, she owns the servers. She has the raw data. Harrison Cole sent me a subpoena an hour ago. An hour they have everything. The trips to Cabo, the jewelry, the consulting fees. They have the receipts where I forged the invoices." "We can fix it," Caleb pleaded, shoving his foot in the door. "I have offshore accounts. You have nothing." Sienna screamed. "You're toxic. Caleb, my lawyer said if I testify against you, I might avoid jail time. I might just get probation." Caleb froze. The cold reality of the betrayal hit him harder than the rain. You're turning on me after everything I gave you. You gave me stolen money. Caleb, you dragged me into your mess because your ego was too big to stay married to a librarian. Get out of here before I call the cops." She slammed the door. Caleb heard the deadbolt slide home. He was alone. Truly alone. He drove to a 24-hour diner near the airport, the only place where no one would recognize him. He ordered black coffee and stared at the steam. He had one card left to play. If he couldn't win in the boardroom, he would win in the court of public opinion. He would paint Lydia as a foreign agent, a European aristocrat coming to steal an American dream. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Gordon, it's Caleb." Gordon Fife was a bottom-feeding journalist who ran a tech gossip blog called the Silicon Shredder. He hated Caleb, but he loved a scandal more. Well, Gordon's raspy voice answered. "The fallen king. To what do I owe the pleasure? Want to comment on the rumor that you're living in your car?" "I want an exclusive," Caleb said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I want to tell you the truth about Genevieve von Hemsberg. She's not a victim. Gordon. She's a predator. She hid her identity to entrap me. It's fraud. It's international espionage. I have details." "Espionage?" Gordon laughed. "That's a stretch. Caleb, she has diplomatic immunity." "Gordon, why does a librarian need diplomatic immunity? Think about it. She's funneling American tech secrets to Europe through the Hemsberg Trust. I tried to stop her. That's why she fired me. I'm a whistleblower." There was a silence on the line. Caleb held his breath. It was a lie. A desperate, massive lie. But it was juicy. "Meet me at the Soundview Hotel bar in 2 hours," Gordon said. "Bring proof." Caleb smiled. He didn't have proof, but he could manufacture enough doubt to tank the stock price. If he burned the company down, Lydia would rule over ashes. He left the diner, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He wasn't done yet. But as he walked to his car, 2 black SUVs screeched into the parking lot, blocking him in. 4 men in suits stepped out. They weren't police. They weren't Hemsberg security. They were federal agents. Caleb Montgomery. One of them asked, flashing a badge. FBI, Financial Crimes Division. "What is this?" Caleb stepped back. "I haven't done anything. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. We received a dossier this morning from the Hemsberg estate." "She can't do this!" Caleb screamed as they grabbed him. "She's a foreign national. She's a permanent resident complying with federal law. Mister, Montgomery. And she provided the IP logs of you, transferring company funds to the Cayman Islands. Hands behind your back, as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Caleb looked at his reflection in the window of the diner. He didn't look like a CEO anymore. He looked like exactly what Lydia had seen at that dinner table, a small, greedy man who had reached for the sun and burned his hands. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and fear. Caleb had been there for 6 hours. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. Across from him sat not the FBI agents, but Harrison Cole. "You're not my lawyer," Caleb spat. "I want my lawyer." "Your lawyer resigned an hour ago," Caleb, Cole said, opening a thick file. "Apparently, your retainer check bounced. The Hemsberg Trust froze your personal assets this morning. All of them. Even the checking account you opened in high school." Caleb slumped in his chair. "So, you're here to gloat. I'm here to offer you a plea," Cole said, sliding a document across the metal table. "Her Highness, Lydia, wishes to avoid a lengthy trial. It's bad for the stock price." "I want a trial?" Caleb sneered. "I want a jury to see how she deceived me." "Caleb," Cole took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Let's look at what the discovery phase of a trial would reveal. Shall we?" Cole pulled out a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance. It showed Caleb and Sienna on a yacht. August 14th. You were supposed to be at a tech conference in San Francisco. You billed the company $15,000 for a booth. Instead, you were in the Mediterranean. He pulled out another photo. A document. "This is an email thread between you and Gary, your CFO. Subject line, how to hide the cross bonus. You explicitly instructed him to categorize Sienna's $50,000 bonus as R&D hardware procurement." Cole leaned forward. "This isn't a divorce case. Caleb, this is federal prison time. We have documented evidence of 47 separate counts of fraud. You're looking at 20 years. Minimum." Caleb felt the room spinning. 20 years. However, Cole tapped the document on the table. "Lydia is merciful. Surprisingly so. If you sign this full confession, admitting to the embezzlement and absolving the company of liability, she will decline to press the civil charges. The FBI will still prosecute the fraud, but with our cooperation and your confession, we can recommend a reduced sentence, maybe 3 to 5 years in a minimum security facility. And if I don't sign, then we release everything, including the audio recordings." "What recordings?" Cole smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Lydia isn't just a duchess. Caleb, she's paranoid. She installed voice-activated recorders in the penthouse 2 months before the divorce. She has you on tape calling her a peasant. She has you telling Sienna that you plan to bleed the company dry before the divorce." Caleb's face went white. If those tapes got out, he wouldn't just be in jail, he would be destroyed socially, professionally, and personally. He would be the most hated man in America. "She recorded me," Caleb whispered. "She wanted to know why her husband was coming home late," Cole said softly. "She was hoping to find out you were working hard. Instead, she found out you were plotting to destroy her. She was heartbroken. Caleb, but she's over it now." Caleb looked at the plea deal. It was a surrender. It was the end of Caleb Montgomery, the titan of industry. "What about Sienna?" Caleb asked. "Miss Cross has already cut her deal," Cole said dismissively. She gave us the passwords to your encrypted laptop in exchange for immunity. She's currently testifying to the grand jury." Caleb picked up the pen. His hand shook violently. He thought about the library. He thought about the nights Lydia sat on the couch, reading a book, waiting for him to come home. He thought about how she looked at him with admiration, thinking he was a genius. He had traded that look for a reflection in a mirror that was now shattered. He signed the paper. "Good." Cole stood up, collecting the file. "The guards will take you to processing." "Oh, and Caleb." Caleb looked up, tears streaming down his face. "She asked me to give you a message." "What?" Caleb croaked. She said, "The Barolo was 2016. It was a good year. It was the year I realized I didn't need you." Cole knocked on the door, and the guard entered. Caleb Montgomery was led away, not to a boardroom, but to a holding cell. 3 years later, the Seattle Public Library was quiet. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The rain, as always, tapped against the large glass windows. A man in a blue vest was shelving books in the biography section. He moved slowly, his back slightly bent. His name tag read Caleb. He wasn't the CEO of Montgomery Tech anymore. He was an ex-convict on parole, lucky to get a job stacking paperbacks for minimum wage. The tech world had blacklisted him. His friends had vanished. Sienna Cross was an influencer in Dubai now, claiming she was a survivor of a toxic workplace. Selling wellness teas and pretending Caleb never existed. Caleb paused as he shelved a new arrival. The book was heavy, hard-bound, with gold lettering, The Quiet Empire. How Duchess Genevieve revolutionized ethical tech. On the cover was Lydia. She looked older, stronger. She wasn't wearing a tiara. She was wearing a simple, sharp blazer, standing in front of the new Montgomery Hemsberg headquarters in Zurich. Caleb stared at the cover. His heart didn't race anymore. It just ached with a dull, constant throb. He opened the book. He flipped to the dedication page. He expected to see a name, maybe a new husband, or perhaps a snarky comment about overcoming adversity. The page was blank. She hadn't dedicated her success to anyone. She hadn't defined herself by her past, or by him. She had simply moved on. He was a footnote in her history, a paragraph in Chapter 3 titled The Transition. "Excuse me, sir." Caleb jumped. A young woman was standing there. She looked a bit like Lydia did 10 years ago. Cardigan, glasses, shy. "Can you help me find the business section?" she asked. Caleb looked at the book in his hand, then back at the girl. "Business," Caleb said, his voice raspy. "Yeah, it's over there, aisle 4. But honestly, yes, read the fiction," Caleb said, placing Lydia's biography back on the shelf, spine out. "Business is just a lot of people pretending to be something they're not. Fiction is more honest." The girl gave him a strange look and walked away. Caleb looked at the cover one last time. He touched the face of the woman he had thrown away. "I'm sorry." "Lydia," he whispered to the empty aisle. Caleb breaks over. "Those carts won't stack themselves," his manager yelled from the front desk, a kid who was 20 years younger than him. "Coming," Caleb said. He walked away from the biography section, pushing his cart of books. He had wanted to live like a king. Now, he was just a servant in the House of Words, surrounded by stories of people who had made better choices than he did. Outside, the rain stopped, and a rainbow arched over the city, a city that belonged to the Duchess. while Caleb Montgomery faded into the grey. So, that brings us to the end of the saga of Caleb Montgomery and the Duchess Genevieve. But before we sign off, we need to talk about what actually happened here. Because on the surface, this is a story about a greedy man getting what he deserved. But if you look closer, it's a terrifying look at modern relationships and the upgrade culture. Caleb represents a very specific type of person we see all too often today. He suffered from what psychologists call the arrival fallacy. He believed that once he reached a certain destination, the IPO, the millions, the status, he would finally be happy. And he believed that to fit into that destination, he had to curate every aspect of his life, including his wife. He viewed Lydia not as a partner, but as an accessory. And when he felt that accessory was out of season, he tried to return it. The tragedy of Caleb isn't that he was ambitious. Ambition is fine. The tragedy is that he was blind. He spent 10 years sleeping next to a woman who could have given him everything he ever wanted. Power, connections, respect if he had just treated her with basic human decency. He was so obsessed with the appearance of wealth that he couldn't recognize the reality of it. And let's talk about Lydia or Genevieve. Her silence was her weapon. In a world where everyone is shouting about their success on Instagram, where everyone is faking it until they make it, she did the most powerful thing possible. She was real. She didn't need to prove anything to Caleb because she knew exactly who she was. There's a lesson here for all of us. When you are building a life with someone, you aren't just marrying their current bank account or their current job title. You are marrying their character. Caleb bet on the flashy, exciting mistress because she mirrored his ego. He bet against the quiet, supportive wife because she mirrored his humble beginnings. And in doing so, he lost the only thing that was actually real. This story also highlights a brutal truth about karma. We like to think karma is magic, but in this story, karma wasn't magic. It was legal contracts. It was receipts. It was security footage. Lydia didn't need magic to destroy Caleb. She just needed him to be exactly who he was. She gave him enough rope, and he hanged himself with it. So, as you go about your week, ask yourself, are you valuing the people in your life for who they are, or for what they can do for your image? Because you never know. The person you're overlooking might just be holding the keys to the castle. Wow. What a ride. I honestly think the moment she walked into that gala was one of the most satisfying moments we've ever covered on this channel. The look on Sienna's face, priceless. But I want to hear from you. The question of the day is this. If you were in Lydia's shoes, holding the secret of a royal title and a massive fortune, would you have told Caleb earlier? Or would you have tested him for 10 years? Just like she did. Let me know in the comments down below. I'll be pinning the best answer in the first hour. So get typing. If you enjoyed this story of royal revenge and corporate karma, please do me a huge favor. 1. Smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells the algorithm you want more stories like this. 2. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, set it to all. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a man who faked his own disappearance to avoid paying for a wedding, only to find out the bride was an FBI agent. You do not want to miss that. 3. Share this video with a friend who loves a good drama. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, the grass isn't always greener on the other side sometimes. It's just painted that way. Stay safe, stay humble, and I'll see you in the next one.